Hello, travelers and tourists. My name is Mark, and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right. I'm a storyteller that's more than willing to let my players get away with shenanigans like suplexing a train. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome to my New Year's special, where I'm going to be talking about how to turn one of my favorite video games into a Pathfinder game. I want to talk about how to play Final Fantasy VI in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. However, to have this particular conversation, I thought it would be good to invite a specialist, if you will, in translating Pathfinder 2e into some different settings. So I have a guest today. Would you care to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, this is Prime Productions. I also have a YouTube channel. Like he said, I have dabbled in converting popular culture media into Pathfinder games. I've done Elder Scrolls, I've done Dungeons and Dragons Eberron campaign setting, and I've done a few others, Amphibia from Disney. I've also done recently K-pop Demon Hunters in a short, and I did Knights of Guinevere in a short.
So in this video, this is going to be essentially a conversation back and forth. We're going to take a look at Final Fantasy VI, originally released for the SNES, and we're just going to talk about what we would do if we wanted to turn that video game into a Pathfinder campaign. But to get the conversation rolling, uh, Prime, what is your experience with Final Fantasy VI, and what do you have you ever attempted to use any elements from that game in your home games, if you will?
So, full disclosure, I haven't ever beaten Final Fantasy VI. I never actually owned the game. When I was a kid and I had an SNES, I borrowed Final Fantasy III. It was known as 3 at the time. And my friend moved away and he asked me for the game back before I could beat it. I tried to beat it on an emulator a few years later, but the emulator didn't work with Sabin's like input commands,
Oh,
and so I got kind of far, but it ended up not working out very well. I have, however, in preparation for this video, done a whole bunch of research. I've watched a whole bunch of videos, so I should know the broad strokes of the plot. But I do want to make sure I I do want to have perfect transparency. I haven't actually myself beaten the game.
okay.
I haven't tried to introduce Final Fantasy VI into another Pathfinder game, but later on this month, January 2026, I am planning, it's not done yet, I am planning to make a Final Fantasy VII transition guide for Starfinder into, or I am trying to translate Final Fantasy VII into Starfinder Second Edition. So look for that video.
When I saw that you were thinking about translating Final Fantasy VII, that was what kind of inspired me to reach out to you. I'm like you. I Final Fantasy VI was Final Fantasy III to me for years because I played it on the SNES originally. Um, and several years ago, back when I was still playing Dungeons and Dragons Third Edition, me and some of my friends ran a campaign that we jokingly called "Not Another Final Fantasy," and it stole a lot of elements from different Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy VI included. It was a very fun game. Me and my friends had a good time with it, and so that is kind of what got my head spinning. I was remembering that, and I thought that could be a fun topic of how you could of something you could do in Pathfinder today. So, all right, so let's begin. We'll start talking a little bit. I won't go heavy into the story, but for those of you who haven't who haven't played, I'll talk a little bit about the setup of the game. Um,
So I had an idea here.
mhm,
I just watched a video about Final Fantasy VI. So since I'm the one that has the less information,
mhm.
how about I try to give the setup and then you tell me everything I got wrong?
Fair enough.
So the story, as I understand it, is that way back in the prehistory of the Final Fantasy VI world, there were three. technically, they were gods. They were not technically called gods, but they were god adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
And they only liked fighting each other. And apparently, they were not big enough adults to just sit down and have a conversation. So, the solution they came up with for not ruining the world was to turn themselves into statues so that they wouldn't ruin the world.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have it right so far?
So far, so good.
So, at some point, they also create spirits and humans. And for a long time, the spirits and humans coexist pretty well. And then somehow humans figure out that they can suck magical energy out of the spirits, which does eventually end up killing the spirits. And this leads to the War of the Magi, where humans with stolen magical powers are fighting the spirits who don't want to get their magic energy sucked into them dying.
Mm-hmm.
The War of the Magi ends with the remaining spirits basically locking themselves in an area. It's kind of analogous to Pathfinder Second Edition's first world, the Fey realm,
Mm-hmm.
and they like lock themselves in with a big stone pillar and giant stones. But apparently, it's kind of leaking because people keep getting into the spirit world. One person gets into the spirit world. She likes it there. She ends up having a kid with one of the spirits. And then a crazy evil king gets into the spirit world. He starts trying to capture more spirits for more magic energy because people haven't had magic in a long time. And the little kid grows up. Um, and that's basically the start of the game is there's a bunch of spirits
Mm-hmm.
that are turning into magicite, which is like dead spirit magic energy.
Mm-hmm.
And the evil king wants all the rest of the spirits because he wants all the magical energy because he apparently has never heard of sustainable farming. And that's kind of the start of the game.
Not a bad summary. Not a bad summary. The that actually covers it pretty well. The setup, as you said, you have the three gods. I think they're called the Warring Triad in the game, if I remember correctly. Um, and like they they're fighting with each other. Eventually, they realize if they keep fighting, it's going to wreck the world. So they seal themselves away. They seal themselves, and the spirits, the Espers is the term that when I played the SNES, it was Espers. So if I say Espers, that's where that term's coming from. Um, but they seal themselves away with the help of the Espers, and then, um, like you said, the seal isn't very effective. Some people get in, and then bad stuff starts happening. The the setting itself is very steampunk. You know, with magic being gone for 1,000 years, you have the rise of gunpowder and steam and industry and things like that, and then um, ultimately you end up in a setting where the Gestalian Empire, those are our villains, they decide to mix the industry and the magic to as a force to take over the world. And their secret weapon is the young girl you mentioned, Terra, who they put a slave crown on her head and try to crank up her abilities with magic, and then just like turn her into a weapon and point her at their enemies. So, uh,
One thing I do like about the Final Fantasy VI story, I don't know if this is getting too far ahead, is that the Gestalian Empire, they're bad, don't get me wrong,
mm-hmm,
but they're not like complete comic book villain because when they're presented with incontrovertible evidence that their plan is going to fail and they're going to ruin the planet, they're like, okay, we'll back off. And it's only the fact that they have created a complete and utter madman through Kefka that the that stuff keeps happening. So I do like that plot device that
mm-hmm,
the Empire is super evil. they don't care about killing a whole bunch of magical creatures in order to get magic power to take over the world. Don't get me wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not Joker. Let's watch the world burn kind of.
Mm-hmm. They just unfortunately created one along the way.
Yeah,
Um,
and Joker's an apt description because Kefka is a clown.
mm-hmm.
Like he's a complete insane madman, and he's got super magic powers, but he's also a clown.
um,
I mean
and
that literally, like the white clown makeup and everything.
mm-hmm. The Kefka's honestly one of my favorite video game villains of all time. Um, because of like just the madness and the almost carefree destruction. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's you half wonder if he understands what he's doing on some occasions, and yet he's obviously someone who needs to be stopped as well. So I think Kefka makes for a fantastic villain as one of the selling points of the game. Um, and this is honestly a good segue into what I think are some of the themes of Final Fantasy VI. When you think about telling a story, you want to think about what are some of the big picture story elements. And you raise a very good point. The Empire is villainous. Like you have that kind of classic rebel versus the Empire or returners versus the Empire. You have that classic setup in this game, but the Empire is not like mustache twirling villain. There's some rationality behind the leadership, and there is a point in the game where they do stop because they do realize that things are going too far, but then unfortunately they got too close to the edge and Kefka pushes it over.
Yeah,
um, so I think that is a very I think that's a very interesting take on that story trope. And you get characters like General Leo that's in the Empire, but he's a very honorable individual. So like, it's intelligent story writing, I think.
I do like that. I was looking at some of the themes that I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for those who don't know, I have a undergraduate degree in creative writing, so I actually have formal training in like recognizing story themes. Doesn't mean I'm good at it, but I have formal training. And one of the let's see, what am I trying to say? A couple of the themes. So one of the themes that comes up in every Final Fantasy game is environmentalism, right? Don't
Mm-hmm.
ruin the environment. Another theme that comes up in Final Fantasy a lot, I don't know why. I mentioned this in my video. Don't use crazy super science and or magic to create super soldiers. It never works out well. I don't know why that's a theme, but it
Mm-hmm.
shows up in a lot of Final Fantasy games.
That is very popular. You're right. Um, kind of jumping to the main one I was going to talk about, but I think you've hit the nail on the head. I really think Final Fantasy VI, if you were to summarize the theme down, I think it could be power is dangerous.
Yeah,
Because,
you have to use power responsibly.
yeah, because like in the mythology, you have these warring gods who ultimately like they realize, oh, we are wrecking everything. We have to choose to stop, or everything burns.
Right.
And like for all of the terrible things they did, they had enough self restraint to shut themselves down. But then, like, the Gestalian
Uh,
Empire comes in and starts playing with the same dangerous stuff.
Evidently, they didn't have enough self restraint to just sit down and talk out their problems, but baby steps.
It's mythology. You don't expect simple answers in that case.
Fair enough.
um, but it's like um, the Gestalian Empire is playing with a force that once destroyed the world, and in effect, they destroy the world. Minor plot spoiler there. When Kefka pushes it too far, you go from the world of balance to the world of ruin, and it's like essentially what the gods tried to avoid. The Empire causes because they played with the same stuff.
Exactly. And
Um,
this is not a Final Fantasy VI exclusive theme. It happens in like Final Fantasy 15.
mhm,
It's kind of present in Final Fantasy VII with Shinra being
mhm,
just abusing their power. Final Fantasy II has it with their evil empire.
mhm. Apparently, Square Enix just really loves playing with that theme and that concept in their stories. And
That and environmentalism.
mhm.
Environmentalism, use power responsibly, don't create super soldiers.
um, and then some of the other, I think, minor themes that fall under it that are at least worth mentioning. You obviously have industry and magic, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that does play into the environmentalism themes that you've mentioned. And then another thing that I wasn't mindful of this when I was a kid, but looking back, Final Fantasy VI has some interesting things to say about the concept of wealth because you bump into a lot of very rich characters in that story. And like there's one particularly wealthy individual that you see at the auction house before the World of Ruin and after the World of Ruin, and they're just throwing around absurd amounts of money while people in the same town are struggling to survive. And like looking back now, I'm like, there's some commentary in there that I wasn't paying attention to when I was a kid. Um,
Another thing is you've got the Empire, who's obviously very wealthy, and they're
mm,
using their wealth for evil.
mm-hmm,
And then you have Setzer, who is also very wealthy, but even though he's in most stories he would be the bad guy, right? He's like this
mm-hmm,
gambler, uh, outlaw, pirate kind of guy.
mm-hmm,
He's one of the good guys because he's not using his money to hurt people.
mm-hmm. The Setzer was one of the other ones I was going to bring up, and then Edgar and Sabin Figaro. Um, both are heirs to a very wealthy kingdom in their own right. And so there's sort of this like, what is the moral use of wealth and what is the moral use of, like, if you come from one of these backgrounds, how should you conduct yourself? And like, now that I'm older, I really appreciate that about the story because kind of like they could have just made the Empire cartoonishly evil,
Mm-hmm.
they could have made the wealthy characters like cartoonish or one note, but they don't. Like you get some very nuanced characters and very nuanced portrayals, and I like that about the game. So, um, and then uh, the last theme that I wanted to mention, I don't know if you've got any more that you were thinking of, but the last one that I wanted to mention, because this one is very explicit to the game, is the concept of hope. Because in Bannon's conversation with Terra, like he literally says, "You are our hope, and we're dependent on the choices you make." And so,
Yeah, hope is powerful. Another one that's really powerful. I don't know if this was a theme back in the day, or it is a theme, but I don't know if it was ever explicitly named back in the day.
mm-hmm,
But it's like the concept of found family, right?
mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm,
you have this huge cast of possible player characters. All of them are really interesting, and they all care about each other. They are willing to die to work together to try and save the world. Whereas some of them probably wouldn't have tried to do that if they didn't have friends in the game, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, Several of the characters, from what I understand, Setzer comes to mind. He's not going to go and try and save the world on his own.
Mm-hmm.
He's but he does when his friends are in danger.
Mm-hmm. Setzer's a good example. Shadow's story is a good example of that. Um, one of the articles I was reading in preparing for this talks about how it's very noticeable that when you confront Kefka at the end of the game, Shadow uses the word friend for the first time, as his reason to fight. So you're right. That is another theme that goes well into the story, and all of these are, I think, why the game has endured so well. Not just a fun game, but some solid story beats to go with it. So we could probably sit here all day and talk about some of our favorite story beats in there. Let's get to the actual conversation. Let's say that you are a Pathfinder 2 EGM and you are interested in running a campaign set in the world of Final Fantasy VI. What elements do you need to consider? What things do you want to do? Let's talk through some of the options and some of the things that you would want to maybe look at mechanically in designing one of these stories. So let's start and talk about. Uh, let's go through the ABCs. Let's start with ancestries. What ancestries would you say fit well in Final Fantasy VI?
So first off, the two ancestries that you see as player characters right off the bat, that like first intro scene,
Mm-hmm.
are at the time you think Terra is human,
Mm-hmm.
so human, and then one of the harder ones is Moogles, and you do
Yes.
eventually get a Moogle in your party where you can.
Mm-hmm.
So figuring out a way to stat up a Moogle might be interesting. And then, yeah, humans are the only other one. For Moogle, I might just make it easy and go awakened animal
Mm-hmm.
and just say that all Moogles have the stats of awakened animals, even if they haven't gone through the ritual to awaken an animal.
So, spoiler alert for later in this video, we're actually going to do a back and forth where we compare builds for different characters.
Mhm.
Um, and I do have some thoughts on how to do a Moogle when we get to Mog. um, but yes, humans and Moogles would be kind of your two most notable ancestries. Um, I went down a rabbit hole on this and tried to think, okay, how can I give my players more options than just human? um,
So yeah, I had two others that I think work.
okay.
Um, One is, well, I guess technically three. Um, Umaro,
Mm-hmm.
who is possibly a yaksha, which came out in the Tianjia guide.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you could do any number of other things. You could reflavor Minotaur,
Mm-hmm.
giant big beast guy. I don't know how you want to. There's a couple options. Jotunborn. Um, and then the other one is, like I said, uh, the evil empire experimented with Kefka to make him a super soldier, and
Mm-hmm.
it drove him mad. But they've kept on experimenting, and they have a few other super soldiers, and one does join your party. And the way to do that would be, in my mind, either flesh warp or human with custom mixed heritage flesh warp.
Mm-hmm. I do think Flesh Warp is a fantastic uh, reflection of that because you do have the various people who were experimented on with Magitech, and yeah, Flesh Warp is a fantastic way to represent that. Um,
And then the last one is spoiler for a super old 1990s game. Terra, it turns out, is half human, half spirit Esper.
mm-hmm.
There's a couple of ways to do this. I'm looking down at my notes right now. That's why I'm looking down here. I need to. Um, there's a couple of ways to do this. If you wanted to emphasize that she's part human, then human with custom mixed heritage Yaksha that gets her the spirit trait and the human trait. If you want to emphasize the fact that she can switch back and forth between a human form and like an Esper spirit form, I would go with a celestial Yao Guai who have the ability to switch back and forth between a human guise and like a
Mhm.
different guise.
The Yao guy or the Aksha both I think work really well. And you've already kind of hit on awakened animals can work in a few instances in this game. Um, the Honestly, awakened animal is kind of my thoughts for Umaro. But
Oh, also Ultros, I guess, is
yes,
he's a bad guy. He doesn't join your party, but he would be an awakened animal as well.
oh yeah. Um, uh, Ultros was actually one of my notes down here.
Oh, sorry.
So I hit those, and then a couple of the other things. On the Phantom train, you can have ghosts temporarily join your party. So it is not out of the realm of possibility to have use the ghost rules from Book of the Dead. Um, and
I didn't think
then
about that, but yeah.
and then the other thing that I tried to find as many excuses to give as many options as possible. You do see a wolfman who is a thief in Narsh in the World of Balance. And he's not, and you don't see other people of the same background as that guy. I forget what his name is, um, but there's a few different options for that. You could say he's beastkin. You could use the were creature archetype from Howl of the Wild, or you could just say that he's one of the animal esque ancestries that's in Pathfinder. So I think Shuni is the dog folk in Pathfinder setting.
If you
Um,
wanted to go full wolf, you could use the Vlaka from Starfighter,
mhm,
who don't have any abilities that are too out of balance with the Pathfinder rules. Vlaka don't get a fly speed at level 1, for example.
mhm. The way I think I would argue if I had a player who wanted to do something that wasn't just like human or awakened animal, what I would probably do for the setting is the setting is recovering from has had a long recovery from the War of the Magi, and it does seem that there's lots of very small communities that have never gotten very big since the War of the Magi occurred. So you could probably argue that other ancestries are possible in very small quantities, but they might be uncommon or rare rather than common like they would typically be in Pathfinder. Is kind of the approach I think I would take as a GM if someone was like, I really want to play an elf or I really want to play a dwarf. That's how I might try to justify it. So,
One last thought.
mm-hmm,
If you wanted to play like a spirit, an Esper in hiding or
mm-hmm,
something, you could use, like I said earlier, Yao Guai or Yaksha,
mm-hmm,
because the Yao Guai can transform back and forth between a human form and a whatever their weird spiritual form, and Yaksha actually have the spirit tag.
mm-hmm. So,
I believe. I'll double check. I've got archives and methods pulled up for this reason.
I will admit I'm not as familiar with Tian Sha, so
Yeah, Yaksha has the spirit tag. It does not. They are not humanoids. They are spirits.
okay. So, so that's sort of ancestries in Final Fantasy VI. Human, you can obviously pull off. I think you can play around with some versatile heritages. Yaksha, Yaoguai, Awakened Animals is very doable, and then past that, you might have. I think a GM would have to call it uncommon or rare, but they might be able to play with tiny community hidden somewhere if they really wanted to.
Another one for the wolf thief guy would be Kitsune.
Ooh, good one. I didn't even think of that. So that's kind of looking at the ancestries. As for backgrounds, I don't really think there's too much you would have to worry about on backgrounds. Um, Starting at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and say if it's in Guns and Gears, it's probably a good fit. So,
Yeah, the only thing is certain backgrounds related to magic, like Academy Dropout,
Mm-hmm.
are maybe you'd have to make them uncommon or rare. I
Mm-hmm.
do know there's one town in Final Fantasy VI that has like a community of magic users
Mm-hmm.
that are like descended from the Magi that shouldn't have magic by the logic of the game, but they do because I don't know why. So like yeah, but like Academy Dropout might have to be different. But other than that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we'll move on past backgrounds because that's not too hard to figure out. Let's talk about the fun one, classes. Because if you're a storyteller who's going to run Final Fantasy VI, there's a lot of conversations to have about classes. And then after we talk about classes, we'll also want to have a conversation about how to do espers and magicite, because that's also an aspect of the game that you want to think about as a storyteller. Kick us off. What are your thoughts for classes that you think fit well in this kind of game and classes that you think might need to be altered or maybe even excluded? So,
So the easy answer is any class that doesn't have magic
mm-hmm,
or inherent magic is fine.
mm-hmm,
I don't think we get like an alchemist in Final Fantasy VI, but I also, since Pathfinder alchemy isn't magic, I don't think uh, Final Fantasy VI alchemist would be like against lore or
mm-hmm,
anything. But like, you know, swashbuckler, fighter, barbarian,
mm-hmm.
investigator, rogue, ranger, as long as they don't take any warden spells, monk, as long as they don't take any chi spells, swashbuckler, maybe thaumaturge. That one's
Mm-hmm.
iffy.
So, yeah, the start of it is pretty easy. Anything that's not a quote unquote magic class is an easy fit. And I agree with you. I think Alchemist is actually a very good fit for Final Fantasy. Potion shops are very prevalent, and that is like the primary healing in the world because magic isn't present. So, um, I think Alchemist is a very strong fit for the setting. You don't have Alchemist characters, but you do see what would be alchemy and Pathfinder represented in the setting. Um, but yeah, so any of those classes, and like I said, guns and gears, inventor and gunslinger, I think are both easy shoe-ins for this setting. Um, but
From Battle Cry, Commander and Guardian. I
mm-hmm,
don't think we get Commander and Guardians, but like it wouldn't go against lore either.
mm-hmm. Um, but then you flip over to the magic side of the equation, and pretty much anything with magic is automatically going to be at least uncommon and arguably rare in a lot of circumstances. Um, I think
So
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, no, I agree. I agree. There's two. I would say that most magic classes are rare,
Mm-hmm.
except for sorcerer,
Mm-hmm.
who we have a sorcerer in the party basically, and then also there's that village of magi that can do magic even though they're not supposed to be able to.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Strago comes from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they seem to have inherent magic that's been passed down through the generations. So sorcerer for them as well, maybe.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of magic classes, you would kind of do like Strago and that village. Your magic characters, if somebody wants to play one, would come from something like that village. Would be, um, you know, they're not well known. The magic is not discussed, even if people have it. You know, it's kind of a hidden facet of society. Um, I do think that Mog Armoogle is a magic class. I'll save the specific one for whenever we're doing the back and forth on that. But the his dances strike me
Mhm.
as magic.
The
But
only other thing, oh, sorry, keep going.
um, I do. Um, sorry, my brain went off on a tangent there. But yeah, I think any magic character is probably going to be like that. Is going to be from a hidden community of some sort. And in fact, the one village you talk about that Strago comes from, they actively try to hide their magic. Magic is a fearful thing. And so if you have magic, even people who aren't necessarily Empire are not going to trust you because of the War of the Magi and the influence it had on the world. The One of the things I was thinking about mechanically is feats like Conceal Spell that wizards and witches have. I would actually make that a feat option for any magic class. And it would probably be an expectation if you're going to use magic that you want to try to conceal it in most circumstances just because of the reaction that most people would have to it. So,
Yeah, certainly true. It's Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else for magic classes. Final Fantasy VI doesn't really have like druidic primal like nature magic.
mhm,
So yeah, animist and druid one would be if you allowed those.
mhm,
They don't technically go against lore, but like nobody thinks that they exist. So you'd be straying a little from the Final Fantasy VI world if you allowed those. But those are the only other ones that I can think of, unless you are talking about someone who is doing uh, Esper spirit stuff.
mhm. the the actual class that I think I would be the most likely not to prohibit, but this would be the class that someone would have to give me a really good background for if they wanted to play it, is cleric. Um, because with the gods having sealed themselves away, and with the gods kind of being villains in the story, religion pretty much does not exist in Final Fantasy VI. Um, and like Bannon has an ability that looks like cleric ability, so I'm not saying the abilities don't exist, but I think that that would actually be the rarest class for me, just because you don't see examples of those kinds of characters in the story.
If you wanted to have like a divine cleric like
Mm-hmm.
class, I think I would encourage Oracle and just
Mm-hmm.
say that your patron or the person giving you power is an Esper who wants to influence the world of balance or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
And that makes a convenient transition to the next point I want to talk about, Esper magic.
Hmm.
So, uh, in Final Fantasy VI, you have all of these characters who quite often fit more martial roles. You know, you can find fighters and inventors and alchemists and, you know, people who are just using normal everyday skills, but as part of the game, part of the setting, people can learn magic through the use of magicite. So, I have some thoughts on how I would incorporate magicite, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. If you were going to do a Final Fantasy VI style game where characters could meet espers, could find magicite, and could learn magic, how would you do that?
Well, there's kind of two ways I would do
Mm-hmm.
that. If somebody wanted to start off with some magicite and like had a deep bond with one piece of magicite, which remember is like a dead esper that they get magic from, I would go either oracle or witch
Mm-hmm.
or kineticist.
Ooh.
There's like Ruma, the like lightning esper,
Mm-hmm.
storm kinet. Like you'd have to basically be a single gate kineticist, but like there's like plant kineticists or plant espers that you could get plant magic from.
Mm-hmm.
Be Instead of connecting to an elemental plane, you'd be connecting to an esper. But that would be a way to do that, I think.
So what I went a little bit of a different tactic, but I like the kineticist suggestion. That didn't occur to me, and I'm adding that to my notes. um, the 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 approach I was looking at in Secrets of Magic, which they haven't remastered yet. I'm expecting that we'll probably get some book that's a remaster eventually, but in Secrets of Magic, they have a rule set called Pervasive Magic, um, which basically adds spellcasting feats to every class. And thus, you can play a fighter and you have all your normal fighter build, but then if you want to pick up some spells because you're in an area with pervasive magic, you would take spellcasting feats with your regular class feats. Um, and I think that is a very easy way to do it. Just in game, if somebody finds a piece of magicite, then you could use the pervasive magic rules. Or if you wanted to go a little bit further with it, you could let spellcasting be free archetype for your game, but the free archetype doesn't unlock until somebody has the Esper has access to magicite to unlock an archetype.
Certainly an option. There's one other. I'm trying to remember what they're called. There are uh, magic items you can get in Pathfinder. What are they called? They're not talismans. They're non-consumable talismans. But if you have one, it lets you cast spells.
Spell
A
hearts.
very limited set of spells. But like if you attach it to your weapon, it lets you cast a fire spell. If you attach it to your armor, it gives you
Mm-hmm.
fire resist. I forget what it's called. Spell hearts. That's it.
Yes.
Spell
Okay.
hearts. Now, technically, rules as written, you have to be a spellcaster in order to be casting a spell from a spell heart. That's not always true for every magic item. It's true for spell hearts, but I would just waive that.
Mm-hmm.
There are also, if you slot Aeon Stones into a Wayfinder, sometimes that will let you cast spells. I know the Dusty Rose Prism slotted into a Wayfinder lets you cast Shield, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So if you kind of expanded that out, it had really powerful Wayfinders that let you cast really powerful magic from effectively Aeon Stones. That would be another way to do it as a purely item-based way to do it,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I think, what happens in Final Fantasy VI. You can swap out Magicite from different people, right?
Mm-hmm. Uh, you equip the magicite, and over time you learn the spell from the magicite.
Right.
Um, and so, like,
But then
once
you
you learn
can
the spell, you
unequip the
can.
spell
Yeah.
and re-equip it to somebody else, and then
Mm-hmm.
they'd have to learn it, right? So it's not going to be a perfect fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's some options. I think also artifacts can give
Mm-hmm.
you the ability to cast spells. So if you statted up a bunch of magicite as artifacts,
Mm-hmm.
that would be another way to do it.
Very true. And all of this is kind of dovetailing perfectly into the next section to talk about, which is equipment. So we can keep the magicite going, but we can add equipment as we go. What equipment fits well in a Final Fantasy VI style Pathfinder game?
I mean, you got a bunch of different weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So, all the normal standard weapons and armor is there.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, for a Japanese made game, I don't think Final Fantasy VI has like a Japan or an Asia analog. I think it's all Eastern or European based. Even, what's his name? Cyan. Even
Cyan.
Cyan, who is very Bushido coded.
Mm-hmm.
I, I, I think his ability is called Bushido, but he's always depicted in wearing European style armor and using like a long sword, not a katana. I believe.
He's the closest I would say to a like Japan, feudal Japan style character. So
Right, but he doesn't come from a feudal Japan style nation.
yeah. So
So you might not have people with kakaras, which are the Shinto Buddhist,
mm-hmm.
like Shinto and or Buddhist staff that's got all the dangly bits at the end. It's one of my favorite weapons, but nobody ever uses it in Pathfinder. So you might not have weapons like that. If you really wanted to stretch it, Edgar, I know we're not talking about character builds, but Edgar at one point can pull out a chainsaw, which is a clockwork mahwal.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can get some pretty wacky stuff.
I love the fact that Edgar pulls out a chainsaw and a hockey mask. Like we don't see a hockey ring anywhere in the game. Um, so
It was a
they
very
only
famous stage play that he saw as a child.
on a Friday specifically. Anyways,
There you go.
um,
Another interesting thing to note about Final Fantasy VI is there are a fair number of vehicles, so you could
mhm,
use the vehicle rules. I know that there's a castle that can travel underground. That would
mhm.
probably be like a crazy, like artifact level 20 item. But there are the Magitech suits. There's airships. So yeah, there's a fair amount of vehicle stuff that you could run around in. The
um,
ghost train, technically.
mhm. The longtime fans of this channel know that I am obsessed with vehicles and I try to shove them into any game that I run. So that's probably one of the reasons I love Final Fantasy VI so much. But like, airships are canon. There's even things that look like early planes. You have Magitech armor, like you mentioned, trains. Like, there's lots of different types of vehicles that kind of fit with the steampunk setting, and I think that that's something worth leaning into that would differentiate it from a normal Pathfinder game. So, definitely a good mention. Any other specific thoughts? I think you've hit a lot of the big ones. It's steampunk, kind of a lot of European style technology and equipment and things like that. Anything else jumping out to you?
Make sure you give your players lots of alchemical items.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what Pathfinder equivalent of the Phoenix Down would be, but I mean,
I'm going to admit I have not figured that one out yet myself. Because I don't think the Alchemist has that.
I think I think they have a level 20 thing that lets them do that. I could be mistaken. I'm gonna look it up right now while you keep working.
But yeah, outside of the Phoenix Down, almost all of the stuff that the Alchemist can do, I think, is a fantastic fit for Final Fantasy. Um, and then going back to one of the things I mentioned earlier on themes, um, this Final Fantasy has some of the earliest access to Mithril in any Final Fantasy. Like, you start purchasing Mithril gear in South Figaro, which is the second town you go to. And it's relatively common, and that kind of plays into like Figaro is one of the wealthier nations in the setting, and kind of the conversation we had about wealth. But like in certain parts of the world, it's not hard to get nice stuff in Final Fantasy VI. So,
I did find it. It's a level 20 consumable item called an elixir of rejuvenation. Uh, when you drink this elixir, you are restored to max hit points, and all afflictions of 20th level or lower are removed. There's no counteract check; they're just gone. You can instead administer this elixir to a creature that has been dead for less than a week. When you do, the creature is instantly brought back to life at 1 HP with no spell slots, focus points, or other daily resources.
all right. So if you need to take out the Phantom Train in one turn, you need a level 20 alchemist on your team.
There you go. It's an alchemical item. You can just buy it if
Mm-hmm.
you find a level 20 alchemist to make it.
Um, so speaking of the Phantom Train, um, let's gear back over towards the story a little bit. As a storyteller, what are there any scenes from Final Fantasy VI that you would really enjoy trying to recreate in a Pathfinder game? Something that you think might be a lot of fun at the table. I have one story that I will tell here in a minute, but I'm curious if there's anything you would be interested in trying to do.
You would so to pull this off, you would a have one. You'd have to have players who had never played Final Fantasy VI before. Two, you'd have to have players that really trusted you as a GM and not like immediately call BS and like yell at you. But and this is major spoilers for the game. When you lose on the floating island and the world of balance turns into the world of ruin. And you're just like, yeah, Kefka wins, you lose 1 year later. Like immediately do that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you would have to make sure that you did right by all your players because a lot of players would be pissed by that, and your players would have to really trust you. But that could be a really, really fun thing if you had those two prerequisites out of the way.
Mm-hmm. The that is one of the most shocking moments in old video games, like the fact that they let Kefka win that way, and like you get the dramatic scene of like all of the destruction across the land, and like I think they threw a wife or a kid off a cliff or something in the destruction. Like it's jarring, and I do think you're right. You would really have to have the trust of your players because it that's a gut punch of a scene. Um, but I do also think it sets.
It also removes player agency, and a lot of players really hate that. So,
Mm-hmm,
like I said, you definitely have to know A, you have to know what you're doing. B, your players would have to really trust you.
mm-hmm. Um, yeah, I feel like that would almost be a. You would have to talk to your players beforehand and say, there's going to be a point in this game where everything goes terrible. Trust me when we get there, you know? Or,
Yeah.
um,
And you'd also have to be a good GM, and because I've heard horror stories of GMs like taking away player agency and doing that
mhm,
and then not treating players very well. So you'd also have to make sure you did right by all their characters and
mhm,
set them up in scenes where their characters would be. Like you're not going to have Locke all of a sudden turning into a hard crime boss 1 year later. That's just
mhm.
not his character.
Yeah, you would want to have almost a like after everything falls apart, how is your character rebuilding? Where do we find them
Yeah.
a year later? You know.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I do think that would be one where you'd have to have a lot of healthy conversations with your players. You'd have to have a lot of trust. But if you could do it, it could set up some really good stories. So, um, the the story I have, I've actually tried to recreate a scene from Final Fantasy VI before. I tried to recreate the opera house scene in one of my games. Um, and it's a very legendary session at my table. Like, my players still discuss it. It went completely south from what I was trying to do. Because,
So for the people who don't know, the opera scene, which is very famous in Final Fantasy VI, is where the party is trying to get on an airship because that's the only way they can reach this area that they need to get to, right? And they've
yeah.
heard that one of the only two airship captains in the world is kind of a lech and is really crushing on this opera singer. And by miracle of miracles, that old sitcom trope, one of the members of the party looks like the person that he's on or that he's lusting after. And so they basically swap her for the opera singer so that she performs, he kidnaps her, and then they can sneak on board his airship and then convince him after the fact to take them where they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
But the opera that they do is very poignant and relevant to the plot, and it's a good allegory for what's happening in the plot.
Mm-hmm. It's a very famous scene. A lot of people who've played Final Fantasy VI really love that scene. And years ago, in one of my Pathfinder games, I very blatantly tried to rip off that scene. Um, in my case, it wasn't airship captain going after the opera singer, but it was an opera singer that had some information about some evil vampires the party was dealing with, and the party found out that the vampires were going to attack the opera singer while she was on stage. Obvious setup as I'm trying to get my players to run around behind the scenes and try to stop these vampires and then have the fight spill over onto the stage and kind of recreate that moment. Um, it all went gloriously south because my players got distracted well before they ever got to the opera house. Um, like, let's rob this random shopkeeper and roll terrible, and everybody gets captured. And now, how are we going to get to the opera house before the vampires attack? Levels of the session was hilariously terrible, and I don't know how they pulled through it in the end, but I have tried to recreate the opera scene, and it did lead to a fun story for all of the wrong reasons. So,
I do have my friend. I don't think he intentionally did it, but he did one time recreate the evil army marching on the rebel headquarters
mm-hmm.
scene. And we were supposed to like defend the rebel headquarters. This was way back in Dungeons and Dragons second edition, and it also went hilariously off the rails because we were like level 15 or something, and the rebels keep on hyping up that the evil army is approaching and that they are unstoppable, that they've just devastated everything in their wake. So we're like, oh man, we've got to really knuckle down and do this. So we like set up choke points, we set up barricades. We're like, all right, here's the deal. The spellcasters are going to fly out above the enemies, fireball them all to like maybe hopefully reduce their damage a little bit, and then we're just going to hightail it back because they'll definitely have archers that can shoot us out of the sky. And the GM is like looking at us like we're crazy, like, oh no, we're not doing enough. So we fly out there, we fireball them, they all die. We come back and we're like, what the heck? They weren't terrible at all. And we were like, GM, you said that this was the evil, super terrible army. And he's like, no, I said that the rebel leader, who was level 1, said that they were a super evil, terrible army.
Ah, the joys of high level PCs and all the ways they can break things. So, all right. So that's kind of an introduction to storytelling, Final Fantasy VI, and some of the themes, some of the mechanical things you might want to consider. To anyone who is watching this, if you have suggestions or if you've tried to do a Final Fantasy VI style story, jump down to the comments section. Let us know what you've done. But what we want to do next is we are going to talk through building the heroes of Final Fantasy VI. Both of us have created just an overview, not a full 1 to 20 build, but just an overview for the characters, and we're going to compare our notes and see where we agree, or where maybe we disagree. I already know that Cy Prime has a couple of better ideas than me on a couple because he shared a few, and I was like, why didn't I think of that? But we will bounce back and forth between them and say how we might try to build the characters. And I figure we'll start with the very first character that you meet, Terra Branford. How would you build Terra if you were creating her for a Final Fantasy game?
So, like I said, I kind of already gave this one away. If you wanted to emphasize that she was both a human and a spirit Esper, whatever you want to call it, I would go with human and custom mixed heritage Yaksha, which would give her the spirit trait and the human trait. If you wanted to emphasize the fact that she can switch back and forth between her human form and a different form, I would go with Celestial Yao Guai.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, I would build her as some sort of primal sorcerer, probably Fey.
Okay. Um, I also went with human sorcerer, and I was looking in the primal direction as well. I ended up looking at the Draconic Bloodline or possibly the Dragon Blood Versatile Heritage, because she has her morph form that she can go into. And it's not a perfect 1 for 1 like Dragon Scales and Claws and things like that, but uh, something like the Dragon Bloodline or the Dragon Blood Heritage could allow her to change her shape into the battle form that she has. So I do agree,
Uh,
human sorcerer, but
yeah. One way human sorcerer could do that is the Fey Fey form, the
mm-hmm,
polymorph to turn into a Fey, and I'm sure there's a Fey out there that can fly. So
mm-hmm. All right. But yeah,
And if not, you could house brew, home brew something.
all right. So Terra's kind of a softball. She's a sorcerer of some kind. Um, Strap some magic on there, and you have a main character for your series. Let's move on to another easy one. Next character you meet, Locke Cole. Because what are we
So
gonna?
Locke,
How are we gonna make a
okay,
character named Locke? Anyways.
yeah. Locke, human, rogue is obvious. You could do one of any number of uh, rogue subclasses for him. Thief works well. Thief
Mm-hmm.
is everybody's favorite rogue subclass. He's pretty good at deception. So the I forget the name, but the rogue subclass that's good at feinting and gets good at deception could also work. He can like sneak around and hide really well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Either way, since he proclaims to be a treasure hunter, whether that's true or not, I would make sure to look into getting the archaeologist background, which gives him
Mm-hmm.
trap finding and it gives him a whole bunch of knowledge about like ancient treasures and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
or archaeologist archetype. There we
Mm-hmm.
go. And then lastly, make sure to pick up the pickpocket feat,
Mm-hmm.
which does, if you are a master in thievery, which can be at level 7, lets you pickpocket in combat.
Mm-hmm. The but I'm glad you mentioned the word treasure hunter because when I was writing out my notes, I had human, rogue, thief, and then I marked out thief and wrote treasure hunter in big words. Um, but the I think pickpocket is a good skill feat for him. Quick disguise and legendary thief because legendary thief can let you steal the clothes off of people's backs. Um, and then specifically, we know he has the mug feat from the rogue class because that is a specific thing he gets inside of the game. So, um,
There you go.
yeah, all told, human rogue, some variation on that. Locke's pretty easy to build. The next one is where it's going to get a little bit more complex. The King of Figaro, Edgar. So,
Yeah, I would just go human inventor. There's a inventor feat that lets you make gadgets that fall apart at the end of the day if you don't use them. I would definitely get that feat for all of his crazy wackadoo inventions.
mm-hmm,
When he hits high level, maybe get the clockwork Mahuaquil,
mm-hmm,
Aztec chainsaw sword um, for his.
mm-hmm,
If you wanted to do the chainsaw attack.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what I would do.
The I do think he's an inventor. I do think, as much as fans of Edgar might hate to hear it, weapon inventor is probably where you want to go with him. Because things like the chainsaw and what have you, it's probably going to be some play on that. Um, the I do think that he has a little bit of alchemist because he has things like the flash weapon and the poison gas that he can use and things like that. So I feel like he might archetype into alchemist a little bit. I do like your gadget suggestions as well. But yeah, I think inventor is definitely the base class here.
Oh,
Um,
and noble or royal background,
mhm.
obviously.
The next one is going to have some very specific build requirements. You have to be able to suplex a train. Sabin.
Yeah, again, this one's pretty obvious. Human monk. Make sure that you get hefty holler, the wrestler archetype, and Titan wrestler,
Mm-hmm.
and just go to town.
Mm-hmm.
The wrestler can in fact suplex people. Uh, my friend who has a teddy bear barbarian with wrestler has in fact suplexed people off of bridges before. He survived because he was a toy poppet, so he took half damage from falling because he's full of stuffing.
Mm-hmm. The the wrestler archetype is very popular at my table. It's shown up several times, and I think because I have a lot of Final Fantasy friends is the reason that it has popped up. But yeah, Titan wrestlers, the wrestler archetype, suplex feat. Um, because you're using monk as a base, I would use it's a feat chain. It's one of the few feat chains that you see. Crushing grab, whirling throw, and Godbreaker.
Oh yeah,
Because Godbreaker's the one where you can like punch someone in the air up 3 times and then grab
yeah.
them
You,
and
you
slam
can
them.
tech and air juggle people. Yeah,
So, um, but yeah, I honestly think if I tried to run Final Fantasy VI, I'd have 3 people showing up with that Sabin build because of how much they enjoy that. Um, I'll go first on the next one. I'll go. Let's talk about Cyan and how we would build him. Um, I think Cyan is the classic human fighter. Um, when I think legendary swordsman in games, literally he's kind of the character that I picture. And there are a lot of fighter feats that can recreate some of his Bushido attacks. There's a couple of Bushido attacks that he has that are a little bit weird, but I think if you did Spirit Warrior from the Tian Sha character guide, that could kind of cover those abilities. So I think he's just a straight up human fighter. He is legendary with a blade, and let's land some critical hits. But what are your thoughts? How would you build Cyan?
there's kind of two schools of thought. One is he's legendary with a blade. He needs to be the best with a blade. You have to have the most accuracy with the blade. Go human fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Totally valid interpretation of Cyan. I looked at his like Bushido abilities,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, that kind of screamed swashbuckler
Okay.
with their ability to use panache to do these special strikes.
Mm-hmm.
So he's supposed to have a big sword. So I would go human. I would take unconventional weaponry to be able to buy a elven curved blade, which is a big D8 finesse weapon, and then I would just go swashbuckler. Possibly braggart, so he can intimidate his enemies because he's a big intimidated guy. Everybody's like, "Oh, no, it's Cyan.
Mm-hmm.
He's super good." That is how I would run my version of Cyan. Again, he's not going to be as good with a blade as a fighter of his level,
Mm-hmm.
but he's going to have more access to all these kind of weird, wackadoo special attacks.
Mm-hmm. The I do like the finishers filling in for some of the abilities on Cyan, um, because like finishers bring some reliability to the damage of the swashbuckler class, and they bring some reliability. Like those things are going to land if he uses them. So I can definitely see that.
Yeah, a lot of people like to hate on Swashbuckler. Having played one through 10, they're incredibly consistent damage dealers.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you use if you do the confident finisher and you take the feat, I think at level 6, you're doing like 4d6 damage even if you miss. I have so many times my GM got pissed at me because he's like, haha, the final boss is at 3 HP and you missed, but he still takes 10 damage. No, he doesn't. Shut up.
You're not a true GM until your players ruin your boss in one round. Anyways, um, so all right. So speaking of swashbuckler, I'm going to give what might be one of my crazier interpretations. I didn't do swashbuckler for Cyan. I did swashbuckler for Gao. Um, the
That's interesting.
the wild boy from the Veldt. I did human with adopted ancestry awakened animals, and then feral child background. That one's easy, but I did the gymnast swashbuckler because the gymnast focuses on grapples and trips and pulls and other maneuvers that a lot of animals would use, and then I combined that with the wild mimic archetype from Howl of the Wild. And
Interesting. That's not the person I gave Wild Mimic to. Yeah, I mean, I was simple. I just made him a human beast instinct barbarian.
Mm-hmm.
Go for ape, which lets
Mm-hmm.
you have big D10 arm fist attacks. He's going to have a ridiculous uh, strength score, so just have him run in and grapple people when he wants to grapple.
Mm-hmm. I very strongly considered Beast Barbarian for him. It fits a lot thematically, but I was trying to think how can I give him the physical attacks and some of the magical attacks. And
If you did do that, I'm not sure about Does Swashbuckler need attacks or does it need weapons? I'm going to look this up.
okay.
Will you move on? That's one question I'm not 100% sure on. You would probably, if you did that, you probably have to give him the martial artist archetype to give
Mm-hmm.
him D6 unarmed strike, and his unarmed strikes count as lethal, and he could go into a stance then.
I will admit my Gal build is a little bit. Did you find it?
Yeah, precise strike does work with finesse unarmed attacks. So yeah, your Gal build 100% viable.
Awesome. Yes. I didn't think about does he need a weapon. I was mostly looking like the trip and the grapples and the stuff with the gymnast style. But thank you for checking that. The next one on the list, I will go first because I know you've got a better build than I do on this one. Um, the next one is Celes. And I will admit this was one of the characters that I struggled with how I wanted to build. Um, I went human, obviously, with the magical experiment background because that's very much her story. And then I went for an inexorable Iron Magus. Um, I wanted a. Obviously, she's got combat and magical abilities, and so that's what made me think Magus. But inexorable Iron, they specifically are the ones that can charge themselves up with temporary hit points. And so I was looking at feats like spell parry and capture magic, where where you can recharge your focus points and then use those focus points to give yourself temp HP. And I thought that that played well into kind of what she does in FF6. And then the only thing I would add on to that is I would give her the guardian archetype so she can taunt. So.
Yeah, so my build technically doesn't work because there's no like gods.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were willing to be a little flexible, I would make Celeste either a human with custom mixed heritage flesh warp or just a flesh warp, or flesh warp with custom mixed heritage human if you wanted both traits.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just said go champion. That champion gives her ability to block damage for other people. It gives her some basic magic. If you wanted to add more magic to her, then you could go sorcerer archetype to get a few more spells. Because again, it's been a long time since I played this. I believe Celeste just doesn't have as much magic as like Terra.
Mm-hmm.
She does have some spells, but not as many as like Terra or something.
Right. The
So yeah, I would go human with flesh warp custom mixed heritage, or vice versa, or just pure flesh warp. Champion, sorcerer dedication, and yes, magical experiment,
mm-hmm.
or something similar.
Um, when you mentioned Flesh Warp and Champion in our chat, that was a moment where I almost double facepalm because like both of those suggestions are so much better than what I was playing around with. Um, Champion especially has a feat where they can inflict stupefied with one of their reactions, which is a glorious anti-mage option.
Redeemer, there's a feat for the Redeemer champion that
Mm-hmm.
does that, yes.
So, um,
Although that would mean taking Redeemer champion, and then the internet will kill you for not choosing the attacky one.
all right. Let's move on to someone who is a big fan of Celeste. Let's talk about Setzer. This one's going to be another one of my probably spicier takes, but I'm curious, how would you build Setzer?
So I'm gonna have to go back to one of my favorite classes again, Swashbuckler.
Hmm.
But this is a very different build of Swashbuckler. He's probably going to be the Deception Swashbuckler
Okay.
because he's good at bluffing and gambling and doing cards.
Hmm.
Doesn't have a great perception score because you didn't notice Celeste wasn't the opera singer. Um, yeah, it's Fencer. Fencer is the Deception one.
Hmm.
But I would also get the feats. Where is it? Feigns Forbearity, which lets you treat playing cards as either daggers or throwing knives,
Hmm.
and Flying Blade, which lets you do your swashbuckler stuff with thrown finesse weapons, which a throwing knife is.
Awesome.
Um, so that's what I would do. I would also consider Wit Swashbuckler for him because they can Bon Mo at range, which would let him get uh, his bravado or his panache at range.
Hmm.
So he could deliver a terribly witty quip and then throw playing cards at you and hurt you real bad.
Okay. So I will admit with Setzer, I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the because a lot of his basic abilities, like the throwing card build that you have, is perfect for him. Like that stuff is doable. But I was like, how do I do slots? His special ability is slots, and I drove myself crazy trying to figure it out. What I settled on, and I do like this build after I came up with it. I have Setzer as a human oracle, specifically a Tempest oracle, and with the Wellspring magic archetype, where his magic can have very random, potentially beneficial, potentially harmful effects. Um, and then probably dipping into some of the swashbuckler stuff that you talked about along the way for the throwing cards and that aspect of his character. But
And oracles are charisma based, so he'd still have a good deception and
mhm.
be very witty and everything like that.
And of course the obvious gambler background.
I
So
mean, that's a no brainer.
now let's talk about Strago. So how would you build Strago? I know when we were talking before, this one was one that you found a little challenging. So I'm curious, what did you come up with for Strago?
So there's not a lot of great information. So first of all, Strago has magic, and again, maybe I'm just an idiot and I haven't played the game in a long time. I don't know why, because he doesn't start the game with Magicite.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of makes it hard to figure out what his abilities would be. I think I would either go Magus or Witch just for an intelligence based spellcaster, and then I would he's the one I would give the wild mimic archetype to
Okay. Okay. So
because he's the
Strago,
blue mage, right? He's the guy
yeah,
that can
yeah, the
yeah
blue mage with the lore abilities.
yeah.
So, um, Strago's background, lore wise, in the War of the Magi, after the war was over, many of the Magi were hated because of how terrible the war was. And so a lot of their descendants went into hiding, and the town that you meet Strago in, that's where a lot of those descendants are hiding at, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the background of why they have the magic. Um, Strago was a monster hunter as a child, or not as a child, as a teenager. Um,
Mm.
and so um, I didn't go for the wild mimic. I cheated and pulled third party content for this one. Um, I'm a fan of Roll for Combat and the Battle Zoo line. And one of the things Mark Seifter created is something called a monster mage, that are occasionally called Azure mages. So, um, subtle, Mark Seifter, subtle. But I did human hunter, human background hunter. I did wizard instead of witch, but I think witch or wizard would be easily interchangeable. I do think he's intelligence based, and I do think which would fit very well for him. So
Mhm.
um, the uh, the next one, this is one where I also struggled, and I also know that you 100% came up with a better build than me. His Strago's granddaughter Relm. I went down a rabbit hole trying to build her as a bard. I was doing the Zivonia bard, where you can do summon animals, and then I was doing summon animals, a whole bunch of illusion spells, and then charm, confusion, and dominate for her kit. But then you sent one message, and I immediately felt like I don't know how to play Pathfinder at all. What is your build for Realm?
So human, although you have to talk to the GM to let you play a small-sized child character, make sure your players are okay with like the fantasy child endangerment because that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then go summoner
Mm-hmm.
because she draws pictures and then of monsters and then summons them to fight. Interestingly enough, it doesn't work lore wise, but it works mechanics wise. I think the summoner you go with is construct because I think the construct summoner lets you rejigger your constructs.
Mm-hmm.
It's either every level or every time you summon them. So you can always make it look like something else.
Mm-hmm. That you were 100% right. My bard build was me chasing the wrong rabbit. No, I do think summoner, and I do think you're right. I think construct summoner because that is the one that's a lot more. You can change in abilities and change out, and you can make it function the way you want for a particular encounter. So, 100% agree on that. So, since we're talking about Realm, let's move on to a character associated with Realm. Let's talk about Shadow. How would you build Shadow for in Pathfinder 2e?
So my original thought for Shadow, obviously still human.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of backgrounds that work with him. He used to be a kind of thief character. Now he restyles himself as a ninja. Originally, I was thinking because he's got this like weird ninja magic thing going on to make him a Magus, but I think I was conflating him with all the other Final Fantasy ninjas like Edge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I and then I realized a way to make it really simple. Just make him a ranger. Gets an animal companion, good
Mm-hmm.
at combat. If you want to have like weird ninja magic, get some warden spells.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of works pretty well. I mean, he's not your typical ranger, but good at combat, has a doggo, has some magic.
That is exactly what I went for. I went Precision Ranger with an animal companion, and I threw on the assassin archetype at the end. So, um, the originally I was trying to build him as a rogue, but Interceptor, his dog companion, was the sticking point, and then I was like, wait, if I want precision damage, Ranger can do that too, and then I have a puppy. So,
Mhm.
all right, all right. Getting down to our last few characters, let's talk the let's talk about the joyful Moogles. How would you build Mog?
So there's, I did Awakened Animal, and you just say that the Moogles use the Awakened Animal stats, but they're not actual Awakened Animals, so they
Mm-hmm.
don't need the spell or anything. And that would let you, if you wanted them to fly, you could choose flying animal because they do have the wings. If you don't want them to fly, because I don't think Mog can fly because he almost falls off a cliff at one point,
Mm-hmm.
then you just choose a different awakened animal. Um, his weird dance ability is kind of there's two options.
Mm-hmm.
You could go with the idea that he is kind of uncontrollable when he's in his dance, at which point you go barbarian because there are actions he cannot take.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you wanted to focus in on the fact that he's dancing, you do something like a warrior muse bard.
Okay. So the build I went for him, I had I went in a little bit of different direction for his ancestry. I went with Ratfolk. um, because there's actually a heritage like tunnel rat folk, and it's described very similar to like the community you see of the Mughals in Final Fantasy VI. Um, Obviously, you're reskinning it, but
Mhm.
I think mechanically rat folk could work. And then, as you mentioned, Mog doesn't use his wings in the game, but if you wanted a Moogle to use their wings, I think you could just use a versatile heritage like Nephilim and pick up some of the feats that give you access to wings. Um, and then the class that I went for him, I actually took Mog as an animist because the liturgist version of the animist, their magic is described as dances that meld with the spirits of the land, and that's where their magic comes from.
That I did not think about that. That works really well. Also, there's another animist subclass. I forget the name. I'm going to look it up right now. Where you let your spirit take over your body, and it limits what actions you can do. So that one would work for his weird dance, where he
Mm-hmm.
you can't control him very well.
Mm-hmm. So,
Practices. It is the medium.
mm-hmm. So,
Yeah,
but yeah,
getting the relinquish control feat. Actually, I guess it's a feat, so anybody could take it. So he could take it even as a liturgist.
I, I didn't look at that specific feat, but yeah, I think that fits pretty well. Um, but yeah, I think Animus works really well because you have to, in order to unlock his dances, you have to travel to different biomes and actually like let him fight in those biomes to gain those powers. And I thought Animus fits that perfectly. He has to go and meet these spirits in order to channel their powers and use their abilities. So, um,
And just make sure that one of your spirits is the warrior spirit, because that way your warrior warrior spirit animists, when they're in their warrior spirit thing,
mhm,
actually fight pretty darn well.
mhm.
They can get up to very close to martial levels of accuracy.
All right, so those are all of the main characters. Now we're going to get on to the secret characters. Um, and let's start with Umaro. I feel like Umaro's the easier build. How would you
Mhm.
build the party Sasquatch?
So, like I said, you could go in any number of directions for ancestry. I wrote down Yaksha because he kind of seems like this spiritual creature, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you could build him as a minotaur because he's big and he's got big attacks. You could do a
Mm-hmm.
Jotunborn. You could do any number. You could do an awakened animal. You can do any number of those. Uh, if you wanted him to be just a big guy that hits people, again, Beast Instinct Barbarian.
Mm-hmm.
The other one that kind of works for him, just as a big guy who hits really hard and has abilities that mortal humans don't have, is Exemplar. He's obviously not divinely powered, but like you could reflavor his ability to just be big and hit things really hard as Exemplar-like feats. Like he's just stronger than men should be. He's tougher than men should be.
Uh, I really liked your suggestion of Exemplar when you mentioned it when we were chatting. Um, I built him as an elemental instinct barbarian because he has that blizzard ability that he can use, and so that I did awakened animal elemental instinct barbarian, but I do think Exemplar works really well. I believe in game he's presented as sort of like a protector, like he watches over that area of the mountains or something to that effect. And so I do think Exemplar, if you reflavor it a bit, would work well for Umaro and would allow for the, why is this creature able to do everything that he does? So,
That was originally why I said Yaksha for him, was because Yaksha are born with a purpose, like they're like generated by the land to
mm-hmm,
have a purpose. And so, and I think there is, I'm pulling it up right now. Yeah, there is a Yaksha purpose that's basically um, protect places from like death and destruction.
mm-hmm.
Uh, Deny Lady Nanbio's charity, I think, is all about like preventing natural disasters.
This is another one of those moments where I hate that I'm not up on my Tian Sha lore.
I I made a big giant Tianjia Ancestries video. That's the only reason I know these. Respite of leaf and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, respite of leaf and loam is to provide shelter to people.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Um,
oh no, there we go. Respite of cloudless paths, basically shelter people from extreme colds.
okay. Okay. So, all right. So, a couple of options for Party Sasquatch. Now we get. Let's end on the weird one, and I think you and I went a similar direction on this. Let's talk about Gogo the Mimic. How?
So the only thing I could think of for Gogo, because Gogo's a mime and he can duplicate the powers of other party members. The only thing I could think of is to go thaumaturge.
Mm-hmm.
Thaumaturges are pretty good at fighting. You can have them like if Setzer is going, you can have them attack.
Mm-hmm.
No matter if thaumaturges can get bonuses to damage with either melee weapons or ranged weapons
Mm-hmm.
with their ability. They can do a lot of damage. And if you take up scroll thaumaturgy, you can just make scrolls at the start of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can mimic some of the magic that other party members could cast. That's not perfect, I know.
Mm-hmm.
That's about the best I figured out how to do.
Yeah, I think Gogo is the trickiest one of all of them. Um, the really, I ended up going Thaumaturge as well, and what sent me down that path was I was looking at Gogo's artwork, and it made me think of the artwork for the iconic Thaumaturge. I'm blanking on their name at the moment.
Mios.
Mm-hmm.
I love Mios's backstory. They contracted werewolfism as a carriage driver in Totally Not Transylvania,
Mm-hmm.
and then spent like 2 years figuring out how to unwerewolf themselves. And in so doing, also figured out all this weird folklore that helps them fight monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, I think, Pathfinder's first iconic non-binary character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking about the artwork for Gogo, and they even say you don't know if Gogo's male or female whenever the
Oh, there you
character is
go.
introduced. But like I was looking at their artwork, and it's like their gear looks a lot like Neos's gear. I wonder if I could build Gogo as a thaumaturge, and it sent me down that path. And like you mentioned, it's not a perfect fit, but I think it fits the flavor pretty well. Like scroll thaumaturge is one of the things I looked at. I feel like wand implement is probably a necessity for the build if you want to mirror some of the magic. But from there, you could go a lot of different directions.
If you
Um,
wanted to mirror healing, you could go with the chalice
mhm.
implement.
Chalice can mirror healing. Amulet can mirror a lot of the defensive abilities. Like weapon implement can do a lot of stuff. Uh, so like depending on what the other people in your party are, you could take the implements to kind of match them and what their gimmick might be. And then um, the other thing I did for Gogo, since we don't know who's under all of those clothes, it's my I decided not to do awakened animal or human. I made Gogo an elf, so I can start multi-classing at level 1.
Mechanically, that makes sense. I don't think there are elves in Final Fantasy VI, but I mean, I could be wrong.
Well, like we don't know who's under there, so
That's true.
that's how I ended up building Gogo. Thank you for engaging in this fun thought experiment of how to recreate characters. Last question for our conversation together. Which character from Final Fantasy VI would you most want to build for your next Pathfinder game? If you got to play one of these, who would you want to be and why?
It really depends on the game.
Mm-hmm.
If my GM wants to run like a really chill, not super combat heavy, like political intrigue game,
Mm-hmm.
then like Setzer is kind of the big guy to do. if my GM wants me, if the GM wants to do like this dungeon crawl that's just going to be brutal, then you want somebody like maybe Celes or Umaro.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if there's going to be, if it's a treasure finding hunting game, you need a Locke.
Mm-hmm.
So, which one would I want to play? All things being equal, that is a tough question. I really do like my swashbucklers. But you know what? I might want to try and give Shadow a try. I might want to try and pretend to be a ninja as a ranger.
Okay. All right. Um, I think of all of these, if I had to pick one, Setzer would be my go-to. His play style, I in real life I don't love random, but at the table I love playing with random abilities, and the gambler style of Setzer very much fits the kind of characters I like to play. So I think Setzer is the one I would most enjoy. But
All right, so I have a question for you before we leave.
okay.
Which Final Fantasy VI era would you want to set your game in as a GM? Would you want to do the War of the Magi? Would you want to do during the events of Final Fantasy VI? Or would you want to do after the events of Final Fantasy VI, where the world of Ruin is rebuilding?
All three of those sound fun. um, as as a storyteller, it's hard to beat during the events of Final Fantasy VI because of just how many great story moments are built into that. Um, I think I would be most likely to run War of the Magi
Me too, because
because
that gives you the most character options for your players.
the most character options, and you kind of know everything goes sideways in the end. So even if your players go off on something weird or random, it can still fit in the lore. So
Well, and you also don't know too much. You have a lot of wiggle room. Like,
mm-hmm.
did some humans come to the Espers and say, "Hey, you need to lock yourself away. We'll defend you"?
Mm-hmm.
Did the Espers do it on their own? Did people get trapped on the other side? There's like a lot of ways that that story could play out, even though you know the end point.
Mm-hmm.
A
All
lot of
right.
people like to say that, oh, if you say the ending, a movie gets spoiled. But for me, that doesn't spoil a movie. What spoils a movie is revealing the path there.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different ways the journey can go, and that's the enjoyable part of the story. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Before we get out of here, can you tell us a little bit about your channel and a little bit about what's going to be coming up soon on your channel?
So when this should be posted, if it all goes according to plan, I will be coming out with hopefully a Final Fantasy VII conversion to Path or Starfinder Second Edition. I am also planning on doing a Dark Sun D&D campaign setting conversion to Pathfinder Second Edition.
I'm
I
very
also do a
excited
bunch
for
of
that.
other stuff. I do character builds. I do reviews of books coming out. When we are recording this, behind the scenes, we're recording this day after Thanksgiving. I am actually right now working on the Draconic Codex, so I'm hope to have that video out in a couple of days. So I do a lot of that stuff, and once a month I review Paizo's live stream and talk about like upcoming releases and stuff like that. Side Prime Productions. I'm sure you will have a link to my channel in the description below.
Yep. All of the links to his stuff will be in the video description below. When the Final Fantasy VII video goes live, remind me, and I'll throw a link to that in the video description as well.
Thank
And
you.
and of course, to everyone who has watched all of this, uh, we want you to join in the conversation. Let us know your thoughts on running Final Fantasy VI as a Pathfinder 2e game. Uh, Where do you agree with us on setting, on options, classes, all that good stuff? Do you have different suggestions for how you would build the iconic characters from that story? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear those. And Prime, thank you so much for being here. And to our audience, thank you so much for being here as well. Have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.